Her hands shook as she plated the final dish before 200 guests. But when she won first place, she dedicated the trophy to my twins and their father standing right there. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The risotto was nearly perfect. Gabrielle Williams dipped a wooden spoon into the creamy mixture, tasting a small amount before adding another splash of white wine. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Upper East Side apartment, Manhattan's lights twinkled like earthbound stars against the evening sky. She adjusted the flame beneath the copper pot, stirring slowly as she had been taught at the Culinary Institute of America. This moment, standing in her designer kitchen, preparing a meal in a home she once could only dream about, still felt surreal sometimes. Just 10 years ago, she'd been a girl from Chicago's South Side with nothing but ambition and a knack for transforming humble ingredients into extraordinary meals. Gabrielle glanced at the elegant table she'd set for two. Crystal wine glasses caught the light from the overhead chandelier. White roses arranged in a crystal vase added a touch of romance. Everything had to be perfect tonight. The sound of keys in the door made her heart skip. Jamal was home. "Something smells good," he called out, his voice carrying from the entryway. Gabrielle wiped her hands on her apron, smoothing back a strand of hair that had escaped from her updo. "Just finishing up," she replied, watching as her husband of 3 years walked into the kitchen, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit. Jamal Williams didn't look like a man who'd spent 14 hours on Wall Street. His dark skin seemed to glow with vitality, his movements precise and confident as he loosened his tie. At 32, he was already being groomed for partnership at one of Manhattan's most prestigious financial firms. "Important day?" Gabrielle asked, noting the Rolex on his wrist. A recent acquisition he'd celebrated with a bottle of Dom Perignon. Landed the Henderson account. He didn't elaborate, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "They've got a portfolio worth north of 40 million. "That's wonderful, babe. I made your favorite. Lobster risotto with black truffle." Jamal looked up briefly, offering a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's not trouble," she said, turning back to the stove. "Tonight's special." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the dining table. Gabrielle had changed into a midnight blue dress, her hair now perfectly styled. Jamal had removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves but kept checking his phone every few minutes. "Can we put the phones away tonight?" Gabrielle asked gently, reaching for the wine bottle to refill his glass. Jamal sighed but set his phone face down. "You're right. Sorry. Henderson's team is still sending revisions." "I understand," she said, though part of her didn't. 3 years into their marriage, and the honeymoon phase had long given way to Jamal's 80-hour work weeks and networking events where she sometimes felt more like an accessory than a partner. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Gabrielle watched her husband, gathering courage. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, planning for. "I have news," she finally said, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her fork. "Hmm?" Jamal looked up, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Gabrielle took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Jamal's fork lowered to his plate with deliberate slowness, as if any sudden movement might trigger an explosion. His expression shifted from surprise to something harder, more calculating. "You're what?" His voice was cool, controlled. "Pregnant. 3 months along." She placed her hand protectively over her still flat stomach. "I've known for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I told you." Jamal carefully wiped his mouth with his napkin, buying time. When he finally looked at her again, his eyes were cold. "You planned this?" The accusation in his voice cut through the air. Gabrielle recoiled slightly. "What? No, We've always talked about having children eventually." "Eventually, Gabrielle. Not now." Jamal pushed his plate away, appetite gone. I'm on track for partnership. Do you have any idea what this means for my career trajectory? I thought you'd be happy, she whispered, her earlier joy crumbling. We're financially stable, we have the space. This isn't about money or space, Jamal interrupted, standing abruptly. He paced to the window, adjusting his Rolex in an unconscious gesture. It's about timing. I need a wife who understands ambition, not one who's going to be busy changing diapers while I'm building connections. Tears welled in Gabrielle's eyes, but she blinked them back. I can do both. I've put my career on hold already to support yours. Your career? Jamal scoffed. Let's be realistic. You've been catering private events for my colleagues. That's hardly the same as what I'm building. Each word landed like a physical blow. Gabrielle stared at the man she'd married, suddenly feeling like she was looking at a stranger. The days that followed were a cold war in their luxury apartment. Jamal worked later than ever, coming home only to sleep. Gabrielle tried everything, cooking his favorite meals, buying thoughtful gifts, suggesting couples therapy. Each attempt met with increasing disdain. I don't have time for therapy, he said one evening, barely looking up from his laptop. I barely have time to sleep. Then make time, Gabrielle pleaded. This is our marriage, our family we're talking about. Jamal finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. I never agreed to start a family now. One particularly cold December evening, Gabrielle was reading pregnancy books in bed when she heard the front door open. It was nearly midnight, earlier than Jamal had been home all week. She put her book down, hopeful that perhaps he'd had a change of heart. Jamal entered the bedroom carrying a black leather portfolio. His face was set in determined lines. We need to talk, he said, switching on the overhead light. Gabrielle sat up, one hand instinctively moving to her small baby bump, now visible beneath her silk nightgown. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Jamal continued, his voice businesslike. This isn't working. What isn't? She asked, though deep down she already knew. This marriage. Us. He opened the portfolio and removed a stack of papers, placing them on the bed between them. I've spoken with my attorney. These are divorce papers. Gabrielle stared at the documents, unable to process his words. Divorce papers? Jamal, we're having a baby. A black female chef from the south side of Chicago will never be enough for the man I'm becoming. He cut in, his words precise and devastating. You and this baby are a burden I'm not willing to carry while I build my empire on Wall Street. The words sliced through her more deeply than any physical wound ever could. This is our child, Jamal. Your child. It's your problem now. His voice was cold, detached. I've already spoken with my lawyer. I'm offering a one-time settlement of $50,000. Take it and be out of this apartment by the end of the week. $50,000 for 3 years of marriage and your child? Gabrielle could barely breathe, shock giving way to anger. Are you serious? It's generous, considering you brought nothing to this marriage except that useless culinary degree. His eyes swept over her dismissively. Who needs a chef when you can dine at the finest restaurants in Manhattan? Tears burned in Gabrielle's eyes, but she refused to let them fall, not in front of him. Jamal moved toward the closet, pulling out an overnight bag. I'll be staying at the Pierre until you've moved out. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow to finalize details. As he packed a few items, he delivered the final blow. Go back to your world, Gabby. You never had what it takes to survive in mine. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Gabrielle alone in the bedroom that had once represented everything she'd achieved. Now it felt like a beautiful prison, every luxury item a reminder of how Jamal viewed her, as an acquisition he'd outgrown. That night, she cried until there were no tears left, her hands protectively cradling her 3-month baby bump. When dawn broke, casting golden light across the Manhattan skyline, Gabrielle rose with a new resolve. She wouldn't fight for a man who could discard her and their unborn child so easily. She wouldn't beg for crumbs from the table of a marriage that had clearly meant more to her than to him. That morning, Gabrielle packed only her clothes, a few personal items, and her chef's knives and equipment. She left the $50,000 check torn in half on the bed. With just $200 in her account, Gabrielle rented a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, as far from Jamal's world as she could get. During the following months, she worked 3 jobs simultaneously: as a kitchen assistant during the day, a waitress at night, and preparing meals for elderly residents on weekends. The birth was lonely. Miles was born on a rainy June morning, with no one to hold Gabrielle's hand except a compassionate nurse. When they placed the tiny baby in her arms, Gabrielle cried not from sadness, but from fierce determination. "I'll give you the world, my son," she whispered to the infant with Jamal's eyes and her stubborn chin. "And one day, your father will realize the treasure he threw away." The first years were brutal. Gabrielle slept barely 4 hours a night, balancing work and single motherhood. Often she brought Miles to the restaurant kitchen where she'd found employment, improvising a crib from vegetable crates while she worked. Her colleagues watched her arrive with deep circles under her eyes, hands cracked from constant work, but never without a smile for her son. There were nights when she had to choose between paying rent or buying ingredients to experiment with new recipes. There were humiliations like when one of Jamal's former colleagues recognized her waiting tables and made a point of commenting loudly, "Look who's finally facing reality." As she tucked Miles into bed in their tiny apartment that night, Gabrielle caught sight of a photo from her culinary school graduation day. She looked at the confident young woman in the image and then at her sleeping son. "I promise you, Miles and myself, one day, Jamal Williams will swallow every word he said. Not for revenge, but because he was profoundly wrong about who I am and what I'm capable of." As she closed Miles's worn picture book and kissed his forehead, Gabrielle couldn't have known that the used food truck she would purchase with her savings would become the first brick in an empire that would one day make Jamal Williams eat every word he'd spoken. The used food truck that would become her salvation looked like anything but. Parked in a forgotten corner of a Brooklyn industrial lot, its once white exterior had faded to a dingy gray, marked with rust spots that blossomed like urban roses. The owner, a heavy-set man with grease-stained fingers, jingled the keys as Gabrielle circled the vehicle for the 3rd time. "Needs work, sure," he said, following her scrutinizing gaze. "But the engine's solid, and the kitchen equipment all works. Previous owner went bankrupt, not because of the truck, mind you. Guy had a gambling problem." Gabrielle ran her hand along the side, feeling every dent and imperfection. 2 years had passed since she'd walked out of Jamal's life with nothing but her dignity and culinary tools. 2 years of working until her feet ached and her hands cracked, of coming home to a tiny apartment where Miles now toddled about, babbling happily despite their circumstances. "You sure you want to get into this business, lady?" the seller asked, doubt heavy in his voice. "Food truck life ain't easy, especially for—" He didn't finish, but his eyes said everything his words didn't. "Especially for a woman. Especially for a black woman. Especially alone." "I'll take it," Gabrielle said, her voice steady. She'd spent months researching, saving every penny, planning menus in the precious hours between her 3 jobs. This decrepit truck represented more than transportation or a business. It was freedom. That night, after putting Miles to bed in their 1-bedroom apartment, Gabrielle sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by color swatches, menu drafts, and business plans. The apartment was modest but clean, a far cry from the luxury she'd briefly known with Jamal. A single lamp illuminated her work, casting long shadows on the walls. "What do you think, sweetie?" she whispered to Miles, who slept peacefully on a mattress in the corner. "Bright colors to catch the eye, something that speaks to our roots." The following week blurred into a frenzy of activity. During the day, Gabrielle continued her job as a kitchen assistant. Evenings were dedicated to transforming the truck. She'd negotiated with the seller to park it in his lot until she was ready to launch. "Mama, paint!" Miles exclaimed, clapping his pudgy hands as Gabrielle spread tarps on the ground around the truck. At 2 years old, his vocabulary grew daily, his curiosity boundless. "That's right, baby. We're painting our future," she replied, setting him up with his own small brush and a cup of water to paint the tarps while she worked on the truck's exterior. She'd chosen vibrant colors, deep purple with gold accents, and a name that spoke to her culinary philosophy: Soulful Bites. The logo, designed by an art student from a local community college in exchange for a month of free lunches, featured a stylized spoon and fork forming a heart. Night after night, Gabrielle worked until her muscles screamed for rest. She scrubbed the interior until it gleamed, repaired what she could, and paid professionals for what she couldn't handle herself. Miles often fell asleep on a makeshift bed of blankets she'd arranged in a clean corner of the truck, the gentle sounds of his breathing providing the soundtrack to her labor. The morning of her first official day in business arrived with a knot of anxiety in Gabrielle's stomach. She'd secured a spot near a busy office complex in Brooklyn, hoping to catch the lunch crowd. "Today's the day, Miles," she told her son as she dressed him in a tiny chef's hat she'd made from fabric scraps. "You're my lucky charm." They arrived at the location at 5 in the morning. While the city still slept, Gabrielle prepped her ingredients, marinating chicken in her grandmother's secret spice blend, chopping vegetables for her signature slaw, preparing the cornbread batter that would bake fresh throughout the day. As the morning progressed, the knot in her stomach tightened. By 11, when she officially opened the window for business, only a handful of curious onlookers had approached. "What kind of food is this?" asked a man in a business suit, eyeing the menu skeptically. "Soul food with a modern twist," Gabrielle explained, her smile never faltering despite her anxiety. "Traditional recipes refined with classical techniques." The man glanced at Miles, who played with wooden spoons in his secure corner, then back at Gabrielle. "I'll try the special," he said finally. By the end of that first day, Gabrielle had served only 15 customers. As she counted the meager earnings, barely enough to cover the day's ingredients, disappointment threatened to overwhelm her. "Was this a mistake, Miles?" she whispered, wiping down the counters while her son dozed in his car seat, exhausted from the long day. "Did I risk everything for nothing?" But the next day, she returned, and the day after that. Each morning, she refined her menu, adjusted her prices, tested new locations. She created flyers and distributed them during Miles's nap times, targeting office buildings and construction sites. She started a simple social media page, posting daily specials with bright, appealing photos taken with her second-hand phone. Slowly, incrementally, customers began to return. A construction worker who loved her spicy fried chicken brought his entire crew the following week. An office manager who praised her vegetarian collard greens placed a catering order for a department meeting. "This is like my grandma used to make, but elevated," one elderly customer told her, closing his eyes in appreciation as he savored her sweet potato pie. 3 weeks into her venture, Gabrielle noticed a young man from the neighborhood lingering near the truck during her busiest periods. "You need help?" he finally asked one afternoon when she was juggling orders while keeping an eye on Miles. "I'm Deshawn. Used to help my aunt with her catering business before she moved to Atlanta." Gabrielle hesitated, protective of the tiny business that was just beginning to show promise. "I can't afford to pay much," she admitted. Deshawn shrugged. "I need experience more than money right now, trying to save for culinary school." That afternoon, with Deshawn's help, Gabrielle served more customers than ever before. His easy charm and efficiency complemented her culinary skills, and for the first time since opening, she could focus entirely on the food while he handled the register, and Deshawn watched Miles. A month passed, then 2. Soulful Bites developed a small but loyal following. Gabrielle began to recognize regular customers, the lawyer who always ordered extra cornbread, the nurse who stopped by after night shifts, the construction crew that appeared every Wednesday without fail. One rainy Tuesday, when business was slower than usual, a sleek black sedan parked near the truck. A woman emerged, elegant in a trench coat that probably cost more than Gabrielle's monthly rent. She joined the small line, studying the menu with keen interest. "What would you recommend?" she asked when her turn came, her accent hinting at New England boarding schools. "The special today is bourbon-glazed short ribs with sweet potato mash and pickled collard greens," Gabrielle replied, trying to read the woman's inscrutable expression. "I'll take that, and the jalapeno cornbread," she said, paying with a crisp bill that she insisted Gabrielle keep the change from. Gabrielle watched nervously as the woman took her first bite, standing under the truck's small awning to avoid the drizzle. Her face remained neutral as she chewed thoughtfully, then took another bite and another. Finally, she approached the window again. "Who trained you?" she asked directly. "Culinary Institute of America," Gabrielle answered, a hint of pride in her voice. "And my grandmother before that." The woman nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "I'm Alexandra Prentice. I write for the Brooklyn Palette." Gabrielle's heart skipped a beat. The Brooklyn Palette was a respected local food publication, known for launching several chefs to wider recognition. "This food," Alexandra continued, "is extraordinary. The technique behind that glaze, the balance of sweet and acid in the collards, it doesn't belong in a food truck." For a moment, Gabrielle thought it was criticism. Then Alexandra smiled, the first real expression she'd shown. "I mean that as a compliment. You're a hidden gem. Would you mind if I featured you in my column?" A week later, Alexandra's review appeared online and in print. Hidden in plain sight on the corner of Fulton and Washington, Soulful Bites represents the best of what New York's food scene can offer: authentic cuisine elevated by technical mastery, served without pretension from a humble food truck. Chef Gabrielle Thompson, a CIA graduate, transforms traditional soul food into sublime culinary experiences that honor tradition while pushing boundaries. The bourbon-glazed short ribs practically melt off the bone, while the jalapeno cornbread achieves the holy grail of being both light and substantial. The morning the review was published, Gabrielle arrived at her usual spot to find a line already forming, longer than any she'd seen before. People clutched phones displaying Alexandra's article, tourists consulted maps to find her location, locals who'd never stopped now waited patiently for a taste. "Mama, lots of people," Miles observed from his play corner, now enhanced with educational toys and books. "Yes, baby," Gabrielle whispered, tears threatening as she fired up the stoves. Lots of people. By day's end, she'd sold out of everything, even items she'd frantically prepped during a brief lull. As she counted the day's earnings, more than she'd made in her first 2 weeks combined, a sense of vindication washed over her. That night, after Miles was asleep, Gabrielle carefully cut out Alexandra's printed review and placed it in a fresh scrapbook. On the first page, she'd already glued her culinary school graduation photo and a picture of Miles as a newborn. "First of many," she whispered, running her fingers over the page. In the months that followed, Gabrielle hired Deshawn full-time, using the increased revenue to pay him a proper wage. She expanded her menu, introduced catering services for small events, and even started bottling her signature sauces in small batches for customers to take home. For the first time since Miles was born, she could afford to take Sundays off, spending precious hours at the park with her son, watching him explore the world with boundless curiosity. She moved them to a slightly larger apartment with a separate bedroom for Miles and a kitchen with enough counter space to experiment with new recipes. One Sunday evening, as she tucked Miles into his new bed, a proper toddler bed, not the mattress on the floor they'd used for so long, Gabrielle noticed her culinary school graduation photo on the nightstand. "Who's that, Mama?" Miles asked, pointing to the young woman in the image, her smile wide and confident, unaware of the challenges that awaited her. "That's me, baby." Before you were born. You pretty, he said simply, his eyelids growing heavy. Gabrielle looked at the photo, then at her sleeping son, seeing hints of Jamal in his features but recognizing her own determination in the set of his jaw. We're just getting started, little man, she whispered, kissing his forehead. While filing away the review in her growing album that night, Gabrielle couldn't have known that the same critic who discovered her food truck would, in a decade, introduce her on stage to receive the Chef of the Year award, with Jamal Williams watching helplessly from the audience. While filing away the review in her growing album that night, Gabrielle felt a strange mix of pride and vindication. The photo of her younger self stared back, that hopeful culinary school graduate who had no idea what life would throw at her. She closed the album, her mind already spinning with ideas for tomorrow's specials. This was just the beginning. 2 years later, that beginning had blossomed into something Gabrielle scarcely could have imagined on those first difficult days with her food truck. Standing outside a weathered brick building in Brooklyn's up-and-coming Prospect Heights neighborhood, she clutched a set of keys in her hand, barely believing they were real. "This is it, Miles? Our very own restaurant?" The 4-year-old boy beside her tilted his head upward, squinting against the morning sun. At 4, Miles had Jamal's thoughtful eyes and Gabrielle's determined chin, a walking reminder of both her heartbreak and her strength. "It's big, Mama," he observed, his small hand warm in hers. "Not very big," Gabrielle laughed, looking at the modest storefront with its faded sign from the previous tenant, a failed sandwich shop. "But it's ours." After 3 years of operating soulful bites from her food truck, through rain, snow, and sweltering heat, Gabrielle had finally secured a small business loan. The journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. She'd visited 7 banks before finding one willing to take a chance on a single mother with a food truck, despite her growing local following. "Your business plan is interesting, Ms. Thompson," the loan officer at the 6th bank had said, not bothering to hide his skepticism as he flipped through her meticulously prepared proposal. "But you lack administrative experience. Running a food truck is quite different from managing a full restaurant." Gabrielle had swallowed her frustration, maintaining the pleasant professional demeanor she'd perfected over years of customer service. "I understand your concerns," she'd replied, even as she gathered her documents preparing for yet another rejection. It was at First Community Bank where things changed. A younger loan officer, an Asian American woman who introduced herself as Mei Lin, had recognized Gabrielle immediately. "You're the Soulful Bites chef," she'd exclaimed. "My office orders from you at least twice a month. Your short ribs are legendary in our department." For the first time, Gabrielle's proposal was evaluated by someone who understood her vision, who saw beyond the columns of numbers to the passion and determination behind them. "I think we can make this work, Ms. Thompson," May had said after reviewing the paperwork. "We'll start with a smaller loan than you requested, but if things go well, we can discuss expansion financing down the line." Now, pushing open the door to her future restaurant, Gabrielle felt the weight of that responsibility. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the grimy windows. The space was bare except for the previous owner's abandoned counter and a few wobbly tables. "Can I run, Mama?" Miles asked, eyeing the empty expanse of worn wooden flooring. "Go ahead, but be careful of splinters," Gabrielle cautioned, watching as her son took off, his sneakers squeaking against the floor. His laughter echoed in the empty space, somehow making it feel less abandoned. As Miles explored, Gabrielle walked the perimeter, mentally transforming the space. Here would be the open kitchen, allowing diners to watch their food being prepared. There would be the bar area, serving craft cocktails inspired by Southern traditions. The walls, now a dingy beige, would be painted in warm, inviting colors, deep burgundies and golds that would make guests feel they'd entered a home, not just a restaurant. "Mama, look!" Miles called from the back of the space. "A piano!" Surprised, Gabrielle followed his voice to discover an upright piano tucked in a corner, likely forgotten by the previous tenant. It was old and probably out of tune, but otherwise intact. "Can I touch it?" Miles asked, his eyes wide with fascination. "Sure, baby," Gabrielle nodded, watching as her son tentatively pressed a key. The note that rang out was surprisingly clear in the empty room. Miles pressed another key, then another, his face lighting up at the sounds. "I like this, Mama. Can we keep it?" Something in her son's expression made Gabrielle pause. She'd never seen him so instantly captivated by anything before. "Maybe," she said thoughtfully. "Would you like to learn how to play?" Miles nodded enthusiastically, continuing to experiment with the keys, creating random melodies that somehow didn't sound entirely chaotic. The next 3 months passed in a blur of renovation, planning, and endless decisions. Gabrielle worked with a tight budget, doing much of the cosmetic work herself in the evenings after running the food truck during the day. She painted walls, refinished the wooden floor, and hunted for affordable second-hand furniture that could be restored. The piano, as it turned out, was indeed salvageable. A local music teacher who frequented the food truck offered to tune it in exchange for a month of free lunches. The same teacher, after hearing Miles' experiment on the restored instrument, pulled Gabrielle aside. "Your son has a natural ear," he'd said quietly. "If you're interested, I'd be willing to give him some basic lessons. No charge, just to see if he takes to it." Through it all, Miles was her constant companion, helping paint with his small brushes, arranging and rearranging the forks and knives as she taught him proper table settings, and spending increasing amounts of time at the piano, picking out simple tunes under the guidance of Mr. Reynolds, the music teacher. 2 weeks before the grand opening, Gabrielle sat at her small desk in the back office reviewing invoices from suppliers. The numbers swam before her tired eyes. Despite careful planning, costs had run higher than expected, and the cushion she'd built into her budget was dangerously thin. A knock at the office door interrupted her calculations. Deshawn, now her full-time assistant manager, stuck his head in. "Chef, the fish supplier is here, but there's a problem. They've brought sea bass instead of the cod we ordered, and they're claiming it's what was on the purchase order." Gabrielle sighed, rising from her desk. This was the third mistake from this particular supplier in as many weeks. She suspected they were testing her, seeing if the inexperienced female chef would accept whatever they delivered without question. In the back alley behind the restaurant, the delivery man stood smoking beside his truck, not bothering to hide his impatience. "Look, lady, the order says sea bass," he insisted, barely glancing at the paperwork Gabrielle held out. "No, it doesn't," Gabrielle replied calmly, pointing to the clearly marked entry for Atlantic cod. "And even if there had been a miscommunication, the price difference is significant. I won't pay sea bass prices for a cod order I can't use until next week." The man scoffed, taking another drag of his cigarette. "Not my problem. Take it or leave it." Gabrielle met his gaze steadily. "Then I'll leave it. And I'll be calling your supervisor to discuss why Coastal Seafood consistently fails to honor their contractual obligations. I'm sure the other new restaurants in the area would be interested to hear about my experience before they select their suppliers." Something in her tone must have registered because the man's smirk faltered. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get you the cod tomorrow." "Today," Gabrielle corrected him. "As per our agreement. I have a friends and family soft opening tomorrow night, and the cod is for our signature dish." By evening, the correct order had arrived, along with a grudging apology from the supplier's manager. It was a small victory, but an important one. Gabrielle was learning that running a restaurant required more than culinary skill. It demanded a backbone of steel and a refusal to be intimidated. The night before the official opening, Gabrielle hosted a small dinner for friends, supporters, and a few local food writers. She'd transformed the once-empty space into a warm, inviting establishment with rich colors, comfortable seating, and subtle lighting that made everyone look their best. In the open kitchen, visible to all diners, Gabrielle directed her small staff with quiet confidence. Her menu featured refined versions of the dishes that had made her food truck famous: bourbon-glazed short ribs, jalapeno cornbread with honey butter, pickled collard greens with smoked turkey, alongside new creations that showcased her growing culinary voice. Midway through the evening, to everyone's surprise, Miles approached the piano in the corner. The dining room quieted as the 5-year-old settled himself on the bench, his small feet barely reaching the pedals. Without sheet music, he began to play a simple but recognizable melody, "What a Wonderful World," that Mr. Reynolds had been teaching him. His small fingers moved with surprising dexterity across the keys. The piece wasn't perfect, but the emotion behind it silenced the room. When he finished, the applause was spontaneous and genuine, leaving Miles beaming with pride as he ran back to his mother's side. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Miles was asleep on a cot in her office, Gabrielle sat alone at one of the dining tables, a glass of wine in hand. Tomorrow, Soulful Creations would officially open its doors. The risk was enormous. She'd invested everything, including the modest profits from the food truck, which she'd sold to help finance the restaurant. If she failed, there would be no safety net, no wealthy family to bail her out, no spouse to help shoulder the burden, just her and Miles, starting over again. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, echoing the words she'd repeated countless times since walking away from Jamal's luxury apartment with nothing but her dignity. "You've come too far to fail now." As dawn broke over Brooklyn, casting golden light through the newly polished windows of Soulful Creations, Gabrielle didn't know that in just 7 years she would be opening her 10th restaurant, or that the magazines that were just beginning to discover her would one day compare her empire to that of the man who had rejected her. As dawn broke over Brooklyn, casting golden light through the newly polished windows of Soulful Creations, Gabrielle felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The grand opening day had arrived. 3 years had passed since that first tentative day with her food truck, and now she stood at the threshold of something more permanent, more ambitious, her own restaurant with her name above the door. "Ready for the big day, chef?" Deshaun appeared beside her, already dressed in his crisp white uniform, the words "Soulful Creations" embroidered in gold thread above the breast pocket. "As ready as I'll ever be," Gabrielle replied, smoothing down her chef's coat. The custom uniform had been an extravagance, but she believed in the power of presentation. People ate with their eyes first. That applied to the chef as much as the food. The soft opening the previous night had gone well, despite a few timing issues in the kitchen. The food critics had seemed impressed, particularly with her signature dish, pan-seared Atlantic cod with sweet potato puree and a bourbon pecan sauce that paid homage to her Chicago roots while showcasing her classical training. Miles appeared from the back office, his school uniform slightly rumpled from his nap on the cot Gabrielle kept for late nights. At 5 years old, he had adapted to restaurant life with remarkable resilience. "Is it time to open, Mama?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Almost, baby. Mr. Reynolds will be here soon to take you to school." Gabrielle knelt down, straightening his collar. "And remember, tonight is a big night for Mama's restaurant, so you'll be staying with Ms. Loretta until closing." Miles nodded solemnly. "Can I play piano for the customers again tomorrow?" Gabrielle smiled, touched by his eagerness to contribute. "We'll see. Now let's get you some breakfast before Mr. Reynolds arrives." The first month of operation tested Gabrielle in ways she hadn't anticipated. While the food truck had taught her about ingredient costs and efficient service, a full restaurant brought entirely new challenges: staff conflicts, equipment failures, and the complex dance of seating and serving multiple parties simultaneously. One Tuesday evening, after a particularly difficult service where the sous chef had walked out following a disagreement, Gabrielle sat at her desk surrounded by invoices and scheduling problems. The restaurant was closed on Tuesdays, giving her precious time to address the mounting administrative tasks. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Deshaun appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, placing one on her desk. "Chef, we need to talk about Marcus." Gabrielle sighed, rubbing her temples. Marcus, her sous chef, had stormed out after she criticized his plating. "He's not coming back, is he?" No, and honestly, good riddance. His attitude was poisoning the kitchen. Deshawn hesitated. But we need to replace him before the weekend. Friday's fully booked, and we can't handle that volume short-staffed. Gabrielle looked down at her spreadsheet, the numbers blurring before her tired eyes. The restaurant was operating on razor-thin margins. Every penny of her savings and loan had gone into opening costs, leaving little buffer for unexpected expenses or slower nights. "We'll have to redistribute his salary," she said finally. "Promote Tiana to sous chef with a modest raise and hire a new line cook at entry level. It's the only way the numbers work right now." Deshawn nodded, then gestured to the stack of papers beside her computer. "Bank giving you trouble again?" Gabrielle's mouth tightened. "They're hesitant to extend our line of credit. The loan officer suggested I might be overextending myself as a new business owner and recommended I consider taking on a partner with more experience." The implication had been clear. As a young black woman, she was perceived as a risky investment, regardless of her culinary training or the growing buzz around her restaurant. "Their loss," Deshawn said loyally. "We'll make it work without them." 2 months into operation, Gabrielle faced another challenge when Miles's kindergarten teacher requested a meeting. Balancing her chef's coat over her arm, Gabrielle rushed into the school, having left Deshawn to handle the lunch service. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming," Mrs. Westfield greeted her, gesturing to a child-sized chair across from her desk. "Is everything okay with Miles?" Gabrielle asked, perching awkwardly on the tiny seat. "Actually, that's why I wanted to speak with you." Mrs. Westfield smiled. "Miles is showing exceptional aptitude, particularly in music. Our music teacher, Mr. Blake, believes he has remarkable natural talent. Have you considered enrolling him in formal piano lessons?" Gabrielle felt a mixture of pride and concern. "I've noticed his interest, yes. Mr. Reynolds, a customer at my restaurant, has been giving him some basic instruction. But formal lessons—" She hesitated, thinking of the restaurant's precarious finances. "There are scholarship programs," Mrs. Westfield said gently, seeming to read her thoughts. "For children with exceptional ability. Mr. Blake would be happy to provide a recommendation." That evening, as Miles picked out melodies on the restaurant's piano during the quiet period between lunch and dinner service, Gabrielle watched him with new eyes. His small face was a study in concentration, his fingers moving with instinctive grace across the keys. "He's got a gift," Mr. Reynolds commented, appearing beside her. The elderly music teacher had become a regular, often spending his afternoons at a corner table with a book and a cup of tea, occasionally offering Miles guidance when the restaurant was slow. "So I'm learning," Gabrielle replied. His teacher suggested formal lessons, but with the restaurant just getting established. "I'd be honored to teach him properly," Mr. Reynolds said quietly. "No charge. Some talents deserve nurturing, regardless of circumstances." By the 6-month mark, Soulful Creations had developed a loyal following. Weekend reservations needed to be made 2 weeks in advance, and local food blogs had begun to take notice of the hidden gem in Prospect Heights, serving elevated soul food with impeccable technique. Miles, now attending regular lessons with Mr. Reynolds, had progressed with startling speed. The piano in the corner had become a signature feature of the restaurant, with Miles occasionally playing simple pieces for delighted diners during the early evening hours before his bedtime. One Wednesday afternoon, as Gabrielle experimented with new dessert recipes in the quiet kitchen, the front door chimed. Looking up in surprise, they weren't open for another 2 hours. She saw a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit surveying the dining room. "I'm sorry, we're not open yet," she called, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. "Ms. Thompson? I'm James Morrison from the Michelin Guide." He extended his hand. "I hope you don't mind the unscheduled visit. We prefer to assess restaurants in their natural state." Gabrielle's heart raced as she shook his hand. The Michelin Guide, the pinnacle of culinary recognition. She hadn't dared hope they would notice her small establishment so soon. "Of course not," she managed, professional training kicking in despite her shock. "Would you like to see the kitchen?" The inspection was thorough but unobtrusive. Morrison asked pointed questions about her sourcing practices, her culinary philosophy, and her background. He seemed particularly interested in her journey from the food truck to a brick-and-mortar establishment. "And that's your son?" he asked, noticing a photo of Miles on the wall beside her culinary school graduation picture. "Yes, Miles. He's 5. Gabrielle smiled. "He's becoming our unofficial entertainment, quite the little pianist." Morrison nodded. "Family involvement can be a strong foundation for restaurant longevity. I look forward to dining here officially soon." After he left, Gabrielle sank into a chair, trembling slightly. A Michelin visit, even a preliminary one, was more than she dared dream of at this stage. That night, she added a new entry to the journal she kept for Miles, recording milestones and memories she hoped to share with him when he was older. "Today, a Michelin representative visited the restaurant. Whatever comes of it, I want you to know that moments like these remind me that every struggle has been worthwhile. You are my inspiration, my reason for pushing forward when it would be easier to give up." As the one-year anniversary of Soulful Creations approached, Gabrielle began planning an expansion. The neighboring storefront had become available, offering an opportunity to add a private dining room and expand the kitchen. The risk was significant, taking on additional debt when they had just begun to generate consistent profit, but the demand justified the growth. Meeting with Mei Lin at First Community Bank, Gabrielle presented her expanded business plan. "Your numbers are solid," Mei acknowledged, reviewing the financial statements. "Revenue has exceeded projections for the past 3 quarters. But I have to ask, are you sure this is the right time for expansion? Many restaurants fail in their second year because they grow too quickly." Gabrielle understood the concern. "I've been conservative with these projections," she explained, pointing to the forecast. "Even if we only achieve 75% of anticipated revenue, the expanded space will pay for itself within 18 months. And we're turning away business currently. Private events alone could fill the new space 3 nights a week." Mei studied her thoughtfully. "You've changed since our first meeting, more confident." "I've had to be," Gabrielle replied simply. The loan was approved, and the expansion began. Through it all, Miles remained her constant companion, doing homework at a corner table during prep hours, practicing piano when the restaurant was closed, charming customers when allowed to make brief appearances during service. As his 6th birthday approached, Gabrielle saved enough to buy him a proper keyboard for their apartment, allowing him to practice at home rather than only at the restaurant. His progress continued to astonish his teachers, his natural talent flourishing under regular instruction. The night before the restaurant's anniversary celebration, Gabrielle sat at the bar after closing, reviewing the special menu she'd created for the occasion. The expansion was nearly complete, with the private dining room scheduled to open the following month. Miles had fallen asleep in the office, exhausted after helping fold special origami menu holders for the celebration. Gabrielle hadn't had the heart to wake him for the trip home, deciding to let him sleep while she finalized preparations. Looking around at what she had built, the warm, inviting space, the gleaming kitchen, the wall of framed reviews that had begun to accumulate, Gabrielle felt a surge of pride mixed with determination. This was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Opening it, she gasped. The Michelin Guide had released its latest ratings, and there it was, Soulful Creations, 1 star. The accompanying review praised her masterful technique applied to soulful traditions and impeccable execution that honors culinary heritage while embracing innovation. Tears blurred her vision as she read the words. Recognition from the highest authority in the culinary world, validation of her vision, her sacrifice, her refusal to be defined by Jamal's rejection. Rushing to the office, she gently woke Miles. "Baby, wake up. Mama has something amazing to tell you." As Miles blinked sleepily, Gabrielle showed him the notification, explaining in simple terms what it meant. His face lit up with pride. "Does this mean you're the best chef, Mama?" "It means we're on our way," she answered, hugging him close. It means all our hard work is being noticed." Miles yawned, leaning against her shoulder. "I knew you were the best already." Gabrielle smiled, stroking his hair. What would Jamal think if he could see them now? The woman he had dismissed as inadequate, the child he had rejected as a burden, both thriving, building something meaningful together, admiring the framed Michelin announcement that would soon join the growing wall of accolades in her first restaurant. Gabrielle didn't imagine that in 7 years she would be opening her 10th establishment, or that the magazines that were just beginning to discover her would one day compare her empire to that of the man who had rejected her. Admiring the framed Michelin announcement now prominently displayed on Soulful Creations' wall of achievements, Gabrielle felt a warm sense of validation wash over her. The journey from food truck to starred restaurant had been arduous, but the recognition confirmed what she had always believed about herself, even when Jamal hadn't. She was exceptional at her craft. 5 years passed in a whirlwind of growth and careful expansion. What had begun as a single restaurant in Brooklyn had blossomed into 3 thriving establishments across New York City, each bearing the distinctive Soulful Creations signature, sophisticated soul food served in warm, welcoming spaces where the barrier between kitchen and dining room was intentionally thin. Gabrielle's philosophy that food should connect, not separate, people was evident in every aspect of her growing brand. On a crisp autumn morning, Gabrielle sat in her Chicago hotel room, laptop open to a video call with Miles. At 10 years old, her son had grown into a thoughtful, talented boy whose resemblance to his father sometimes caught her off guard. The same analytical eyes, the same graceful hands, but tempered with her warmth and determination. "Did you practice the Chopin piece Mr. Reynolds assigned?" she asked, trying to mask the guilt she felt at missing another week of his routine. "Every day, Mom. 60 minutes, just like you said." Miles shifted the camera to show the electronic keyboard in their Manhattan apartment, significantly upgraded from his first instrument. "Mr. Reynolds says I might be ready for the school concert next month." "That's wonderful, honey. I'll be there front row, I promise." Gabrielle checked her watch. "I have to go. The realtor is meeting me in 20 minutes to show the space." "The one near where you grew up?" Miles asked, his face lighting up with curiosity about his mother's childhood. "Yes, just 3 blocks from my old neighborhood. It feels right, you know, like coming full circle." After saying goodbye, Gabrielle stared at the blank screen for a moment, fighting the familiar pang of maternal guilt. This was her 3rd trip to Chicago in 2 months, scouting locations for her 4th restaurant. Each trip meant days away from Miles during a critical period in his development. The realtor, a brisk woman named Denise, greeted Gabrielle outside a weathered brick building on Chicago's South Side. "It's not much to look at now," she warned, unlocking the heavy metal door. "But the bones are good, and the area is changing rapidly." Stepping inside, Gabrielle immediately saw past the peeling paint and outdated fixtures to the potential beneath. High ceilings with original tin details, expansive windows that would flood the space with natural light, and enough square footage for her most ambitious concept yet, a restaurant that would honor the culinary traditions of her childhood neighborhood while creating jobs and opportunities for its current residents. "This neighborhood has significance for me," Gabrielle explained as they walked the perimeter. "I grew up 3 blocks from here on Oakley Avenue." Denise raised her eyebrows. "That's quite a journey, from here to New York City restaurants." "It is," Gabrielle agreed, running her hand along a worn brick wall. "And that's exactly why this location feels right. I want kids growing up here now to see that their dreams have no zip code limitations." Later that evening, Gabrielle video called Miles again, this time from her hotel room as she reviewed contracts and proposals. Her son sat at his keyboard, fingers dancing across the keys with increasing confidence and musicality. "Play that section again," she requested, setting aside the property proposal to give him her full attention. "The phrasing in the middle passage needs more breath." Miles nodded seriously, returning to the piece with remarkable focus for a 10-year-old. The music flowed through the speakers, each note articulated with growing precision. Gabrielle watched in wonder, recognizing that his talent had already surpassed what casual lessons could nurture. A text notification interrupted the moment. Marcus, a corporate attorney she'd met during her first Chicago trip, asking if she was free for dinner. They'd enjoyed each other's company during her previous visits, and his intelligence and ambition reminded her of Jamal, though without the cutting edge of ruthlessness. "Who's that?" Miles asked, catching her slight smile. "Just a business contact," Gabrielle replied, texting a polite decline. "Another time, perhaps. My son's piano practice takes priority tonight." After ending the call with promises to return home in 2 days, Gabrielle sat in contemplative silence. Marcus was the first man since Jamal who had sparked genuine interest, but the thought of introducing someone new into the carefully balanced life she'd built with Miles gave her pause. Her son and her growing business had consumed every ounce of her energy and focus for the past decade. Was there even room for another relationship? The next morning, during the final negotiations for the Chicago property, Gabrielle's phone rang with Miles's school number. "Ms. Thompson, this is Principal Gardner. There's been an incident with Miles." Gabrielle's heart raced. "Is he hurt?" "No, nothing like that. But he became quite upset during a family tree project today. When asked about his father, he told the other children his father was dead." Gabrielle closed her eyes, feeling the weight of a conversation she'd been postponing for years. "I see. May I speak with him?" Miles's voice was small when he came on the line. "Mom, are you mad at me?" "No, sweetheart, not mad, but we need to talk when I get home. About your dad." "I know he's not really dead," Miles admitted quietly. "But Tommy Miller was bragging about his dad's job and everyone was talking about their dads and I didn't know what to say." The Chicago property negotiations concluded successfully, but Gabrielle's mind remained preoccupied with the impending conversation awaiting her in New York. On the flight home, she rehearsed explanations, seeking words that would neither demonize Jamal nor sugarcoat his abandonment. Miles was waiting in their Upper West Side apartment when she arrived, Mr. Reynolds having stayed with him until her return. The apartment, while modest compared to what Jamal had once provided, reflected their journey. Framed reviews and awards sharing wall space with Miles's music certificates and Gabrielle's culinary school diploma. "Why don't we have dinner and then talk?" Gabrielle suggested, setting down her suitcase. They prepared the meal together, their familiar rhythm in the kitchen providing comfort before the difficult conversation. Miles chopped vegetables with the careful precision she'd taught him, asking detailed questions about the Chicago restaurant plans. Finally, seated at their small dining table, Gabrielle took a deep breath. "You asked about your father today at school." Miles nodded, studying his plate. The other kids all had stories about their dads. I didn't know what to tell them. "Your father's name is Jamal Williams," Gabrielle began, choosing her words with care. "We met when I was in culinary school and we were married for 3 years. He worked in finance on Wall Street." "Why did he leave?" Miles asked directly, his eyes, so like Jamal's, fixed on her face. Gabrielle hesitated, balancing truth with age-appropriate explanation. "Your father chose to follow his own path before you were born. He wasn't ready to be a parent when I told him I was pregnant with you." "Did he ever want to meet me?" The question pierced Gabrielle's heart. He made his choice very clear. "But Miles, that choice was about him, not about you, never about you." "Does he know I play piano? That I might go to Juilliard someday?" "No, sweetheart, we haven't been in contact." Miles fell silent, processing this information with the same thoughtful concentration he applied to complex musical passages. "Do I look like him?" he finally asked. "You have his eyes," Gabrielle admitted, "and his hands, good piano-playing hands. But your heart, your determination, your kindness, those are all your own." Later that night, after Miles had gone to bed, Gabrielle poured herself a rare glass of wine and opened her laptop. Against her better judgment, she typed Jamal Williams Wall Street into the search bar. The results appeared instantly. Photos of Jamal at charity galas, business profiles lauding his financial acumen, and an announcement of his recent marriage to Veronica Astor, daughter of a prominent New York family. In one image, he stood confidently beside a sign for Elite Dining Experience, apparently a chain of high-end restaurants catering to Wall Street executives and celebrities. Gabrielle closed the laptop, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Jamal had built his empire as planned, apparently expanding beyond finance into the very industry where she was making her mark. The coincidence felt both ironic and strangely fitting. The following months brought a whirlwind of activity. Construction began on the Chicago restaurant, requiring bi-weekly visits that Gabrielle carefully scheduled around Miles's increasingly demanding musical schedule. His talent had drawn attention from serious instructors, culminating in an invitation to audition for a prestigious weekend program at Juilliard's pre-college division. "This is a significant opportunity," explained Ms. Chen, the piano instructor who had replaced Mr. Reynolds when Miles's abilities had surpassed the elderly teacher's capacity to guide him. The pre-college program would put him on track for eventual admission to the conservatory. Gabrielle studied the brochure, noting the tuition costs with an internal wince. Her businesses were successful, but expanding to Chicago required significant capital investment. "He'll audition," she decided. "We'll make it work if he's accepted." Miles's preparation for the audition coincided with the final weeks before the Chicago restaurant opening. Gabrielle found herself stretched impossibly thin, supervising contractor work remotely while helping Miles perfect his audition pieces during rare evenings at home. The night before Miles's audition, Gabrielle canceled a critical meeting with Chicago investors to attend his dress rehearsal at Ms. Chen's studio. "You didn't have to come back early," Miles said as they rode the subway home afterward. "I know the Chicago opening is important." "Not as important as this," Gabrielle replied firmly. "We're a team, remember? Your dreams matter just as much as mine." The audition itself was a blur of nervous energy transformed into musical precision. Miles, dressed in his first proper suit, performed with a maturity that belied his 10 years. When the judges requested an improvisational piece, an unusual challenge for such a young applicant, he rose to the occasion with a composition that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. "That was extraordinary," the lead judge commented afterward. "Where did you study composition?" "I haven't formally," Miles admitted. "I just hear it in my head." 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived the same day Gabrielle received the first professional photographs of the completed Chicago restaurant. Standing in their kitchen, Miles clutching his Juilliard letter while she held the images of her newest achievement, Gabrielle felt a profound sense of vindication. "We're doing it, Miles," she whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. "Everything they said we couldn't do." The Chicago restaurant opening coincided with Miles's first formal recital as a Juilliard pre-college student. It was an impossible choice that ultimately wasn't a choice at all. Gabrielle delegated the opening to her trusted executive chef and flew back to New York the morning of the recital. Seated in the front row of the recital hall, watching her son command the Steinway Grand with confidence beyond his years, tears blurred Gabrielle's vision. The journey from that devastating night when Jamal had declared them both insufficient for his world to this moment of dual triumph felt like a dream. As she rose to applaud Miles's flawless performance, a talent scout from the New York Philharmonic's Young Artists program approached her. "Your son has remarkable gifts," the woman said, handing Gabrielle her card. "We'd like to discuss featuring him in our Young Virtuosos series next season." While applause echoed through the concert hall, Gabrielle couldn't help but wonder if somewhere, in some parallel life, Jamal ever thought about the child he'd rejected, the child who now, at just 10 years old, was already being recognized as an extraordinary talent by some of the most prestigious musical institutions in the world. While watching Miles enchant the audience with his talent at the piano, Gabrielle didn't imagine that in some years it would be this same talent that would place her son on the same stage as the father who never knew him. While watching Miles enchant the audience with his talent at the piano, Gabrielle felt a swell of pride that momentarily pushed aside the bone-deep exhaustion she'd been carrying for months. His fingers danced across the keys with a confidence that belied his 10 years, each note a testament to his dedication and natural ability. As the final chord resonated through the concert hall, the audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet in appreciation of the young prodigy. 3 years later, Gabrielle stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her executive office on the 40th floor of the Soulful Creations Corporation headquarters in downtown Boston. At 43, she commanded a culinary empire valued at $890 million, with 32 award-winning restaurants across the United States. The skyline spread before her like a kingdom she'd conquered one restaurant at a time. "Ms. Thompson?" Her assistant Kayla entered with a polished efficiency that matched the sleek decor of the office. "The Financial Times just confirmed the interview for tomorrow's edition, and Forbes wants to schedule a photo shoot for their most powerful women in business list." Gabrielle turned from the window, nodding as she accepted the leather portfolio Kayla offered. "Thank you. And the Boston event preparations?" "Everything is confirmed. It will be the gastronomic event of the year, as planned. You'll be the head judge, as requested." Signing the documents for her newest venture, a culinary institute for underprivileged youth, Gabrielle reflected on the journey that had brought her here. After that first Michelin star in Brooklyn, expansion had come with calculated precision. Her second restaurant in Manhattan had earned 2 stars within its first year. The third, in her childhood neighborhood in Chicago, had become a catalyst for local economic revival, employing primarily residents from the surrounding blocks. By the time Miles turned 11, Soulful Creations had grown to 5 restaurants. At 12, when he performed his first original composition with a chamber orchestra, she was breaking ground on her 7th location. Now, at 13, with Miles increasingly recognized as a musical wunderkind, Gabrielle Thompson stood at the helm of a culinary revolution that had redefined American fine dining. "Your 3 o'clock is waiting in the conference room," Kayla reminded her. "The delegation from the James Beard Foundation. Tell them I'll be right there." Gabrielle straightened her tailored blazer, emerald green today, her signature color for important meetings. The woman who had once worn second-hand clothes to job interviews now had a wardrobe curated by personal stylists, each piece selected to project the confidence and authority she had earned through years of unrelenting work. The path hadn't been smooth. Expansion meant risk, and there had been setbacks. A location in Seattle that failed to gain traction despite excellent reviews. A trusted manager who embezzled funds from the Philadelphia restaurant, forcing Gabrielle to rebuild that branch from the ground up. Each challenge had been met with the same determination that had carried her through those first desperate days as a single mother with nothing but culinary training and fierce love for her child. Later that evening, Gabrielle's private elevator whisked her to the penthouse apartment where she and Miles now lived. Unlike the sterile luxury of the home she'd shared with Jamal, this space reflected their journey. Walls adorned with both Miles's music awards and framed reviews of Gabrielle's restaurants, comfortable furniture chosen for livability rather than status, and most importantly, a Steinway grand piano positioned by the windows overlooking the city. Miles was already at the instrument when she entered, his tall, slender frame, so like his father's, bent in concentration over a complex piece she didn't recognize. "Something new?" she asked, setting down her briefcase and kicking off her heels. Miles looked up, his face lighting with the smile that always melted her heart. At 13, he was losing the roundness of childhood, his features sharpening into what promised to be a striking man's face, Jamal's eyes and cheekbones, but with Gabrielle's warmth and expressiveness. "Working on a composition for the Berkeley Summer Program application," he explained, shifting on the bench to make room for her. "How was your day? Any crisis that required the CEO's personal attention?" Gabrielle laughed, settling beside him. Just the usual empire building. Are you nervous about the Boston event? Miles shrugged with practiced nonchalance that didn't quite mask his excitement. It's just another performance. Though combining judging and musical performance in the same festival is unique, will they really broadcast it nationwide? Live to every major network, Gabrielle confirmed, her pride in his accomplishments tempered by the protective instinct that had never dimmed. Your first televised performance, my little maestro going prime time. Later, after Miles had returned to his practice and Gabrielle had retreated to her home office to review quarterly projections, her phone rang with a familiar number. "Marcus," she answered warmly. "I was just thinking about your proposal." Marcus Delaney, CEO of Meridian Hotels and her occasional dinner companion for the past 6 months, chuckled. "Considering we discussed it over breakfast, I'd hope it's still on your mind. Have you decided?" The proposal in question wasn't romantic but professional. A partnership between Soulful Creations and Meridian Hotels that would place Gabrielle's restaurant concepts in Marcus's luxury properties worldwide. It was a natural expansion opportunity, but one that would require even more of her already stretched time. "I'm leaning toward yes," she admitted, but with modifications to the rollout timeline. "Miles has his Juilliard pre-college intensives this summer, and I promised I'd be there for at least half of them." "Family first," Marcus agreed easily, one of the qualities that had drawn her to him after years of avoiding romantic entanglements. Unlike Jamal, who had seen her maternal instincts as an impediment to success, Marcus respected and admired her dedication to Miles. "We can adjust. The Paris property won't be ready until fall anyway." Their conversation drifted from business to personal matters. His daughter's college graduation, an exhibition they'd both enjoyed at the Museum of Fine Arts, plans for a possible weekend getaway to his Cape Cod home. After hanging up, Gabrielle sat motionless, contemplating the unexpected direction her life had taken. Marcus represented something she'd believed would never again be possible. A relationship with a man who valued her ambition rather than feeling threatened by it, who saw Miles not as a burden, but as an integral part of the remarkable woman she had become. The next morning, as her team prepared her for a television interview promoting the upcoming Boston event, Gabrielle flipped through the latest issue of Epicure magazine, pausing when a familiar name caught her eye. A feature on America's most exclusive dining experiences included a spread on Elite Dining Experience, Jamal Williams's chain of high-end restaurants. The accompanying photo showed Jamal in an immaculate chef's kitchen, though Gabrielle knew he'd never cooked a meal in his life. He stood beside a famous celebrity chef who had apparently been hired as the creative director for his latest venture. Jamal looked successful, polished, silver threading his temples in a distinguished manner, but there was something hollow in his expression that the camera had captured despite his practiced smile. According to the article, Elite Dining Experience catered exclusively to celebrities, politicians, and financial elites with membership fees starting at $50,000 annually. Recent expansions into Miami and Los Angeles had been met with mixed reviews, with critics praising the extravagant decor, but finding the cuisine derivative and soulless, prioritizing exclusivity over authenticity. Gabrielle closed the magazine, feeling neither satisfaction nor resentment at Jamal's parallel rise in the industry she had come to dominate. His approach to restaurants, as status symbols rather than expressions of culinary passion, was exactly what she would have expected from the man who had once deemed her unworthy of his ambitious future. "The car is ready, Ms. Thompson," Kayla announced, interrupting her thoughts. "And Epicure is calling you the Queen of New American Gastronomy in their latest issue." Gabrielle smiled, standing to smooth her impeccably tailored suit. "Titles are fleeting. Legacy is what matters." That afternoon, while reviewing applications for the first class of scholarship recipients at her new culinary institute, Gabrielle received an unexpected visit from Miles's music director at Juilliard. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for making time," Dr. Isabella Rivera said, accepting the offered seat in Gabrielle's office. I wanted to discuss Miles's development personally rather than over the phone. A flicker of concern crossed Gabrielle's face. Is something wrong with his progress? Quite the opposite, Dr. Rivera assured her. Miles's talent has accelerated beyond our most optimistic projections. His technique is impeccable, but more importantly, his compositional voice is extraordinarily mature. We believe he's ready for more advanced placement. He's only 13, Gabrielle said cautiously. Mozart was performing his own compositions for European royalty at 5, Dr. Rivera reminded her gently. Age is merely a number when it comes to genuine musical genius. We're prepared to offer Miles early admission to our full conservatory program with a specialized curriculum tailored to his unique abilities. The proposal was both thrilling and terrifying. Acknowledgement of Miles's exceptional gifts, but also acceleration of his path away from childhood into the demanding world of professional musicianship. I'll need to discuss this with Miles, Gabrielle said finally. This must be his decision. That evening, over a rare home-cooked meal in their penthouse kitchen, Gabrielle insisting on preparing it herself despite having chefs at her disposal, she broached the subject with her son. Juilliard wants to advance you to the conservatory program, she explained, watching his expression carefully. Dr. Rivera believes you're ready. Miles considered this as he methodically cut his steak, a thoughtfulness beyond his years evident in his furrowed brow. What do you think, Mom? I think you're extraordinary, Gabrielle answered honestly. But I also think you're 13, and there should be room in your life for normal teenage experiences alongside your music. Miles nodded slowly. Like you made sure I had normal kid experiences even when you were building your first restaurants? I tried, Gabrielle acknowledged, remembering the birthday parties she'd organized in the back rooms of her restaurants, the school field trips she'd rearranged her schedule to chaperone despite crushing exhaustion. I want to do it, Miles decided, his eyes, so like Jamal's in shape but so different in their warmth, meeting hers steadily. But I don't want to leave home yet. Can they make that work? Gabrielle reached across the table to squeeze his hand, relieved and proud in equal measure. We'll make it work. That's what we do, remember? As spring turned to summer, preparations for the Boston Gastronomic and Cultural Festival intensified. Miles divided his time between specialized classes at Juilliard and practicing for his performance of Rachmaninoff's demanding Third Piano Concerto, an ambitious choice for a pianist of any age, let alone a 13-year-old. Gabrielle, meanwhile, balanced oversight of her restaurant empire with her role as head judge for the festival's culinary competition. The event represented a perfect convergence of their worlds, gastronomy and classical music combined in one prestigious showcase. The magazine Epicure is calling you the queen of the new American gastronomy, her assistant commented as they drove to a planning meeting for the festival. Titles are passageway. Legacy is what matters, replied Gabrielle, looking out the limousine window at the Boston skyline, unaware that destiny had prepared an encounter that would redefine that legacy forever. Titles are fleeting. Legacy is what matters, replied Gabrielle, looking out the limousine window at the Boston skyline, unaware that destiny had prepared an encounter that would redefine that legacy forever. 1 year later, Gabrielle stood on the observation deck of the Soulful Creations headquarters, watching Boston awaken beneath her. Dawn painted the city in soft gold, a fitting backdrop as she contemplated the empire she'd built. The corporation had recently surpassed $800 million in market value, a figure that would have seemed impossible to the young woman who'd once counted coins to pay rent on a Brooklyn apartment. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message from Miles. At 14, he was already taller than she was, his lanky frame reminiscent of his father, though his gentle spirit was entirely his own. Nailed the Rachmaninoff run-through. Dr. Rivera says I'm ready. Gabrielle smiled, typing back, never doubted it. Home for dinner? Making your favorite. Can't. Extra rehearsal for Boston Festival. Love you. She set the phone down, a familiar pang of maternal guilt surfacing before she pushed it aside. Their lives moved at different tempos now, her managing an expanding culinary empire, him preparing for early admission to Juilliard's full conservatory program. Their paths remained intertwined but increasingly independent. "Ms. Thompson?" Kayla appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "The board is assembled for the quarterly meeting, and this arrived for you." Gabrielle accepted the cream-colored envelope, instantly recognizing the embossed seal of the Boston Gastronomic and Cultural Festival, an event she'd been invited to judge the previous year but had declined due to scheduling conflicts. "They're persistent," she murmured, breaking the seal. Inside was a formal invitation requesting her presence as head judge for the festival's culinary competition, alongside a personal note from the director emphasizing the unprecedented media coverage planned for this year's event. "It's perfect timing," Kayla observed. "The Boston restaurant opening coincides with the festival week." Gabrielle nodded thoughtfully. The festival would provide excellent visibility for her newest establishment, and Miles had already been invited to perform as a featured young artist. For once, their professional obligations aligned perfectly in time and place. "Accept with my thanks," she instructed, smoothing her tailored jacket as she prepared to face the board, a far cry from her early days when she'd faced bank loan officers with trembling hands but unwavering determination. 3 hours later, as the board meeting concluded with unanimous approval for her proposed Culinary Institute for Underprivileged Youth, Gabrielle's assistant approached with an unusual expression, something between concern and hesitation. "What is it, Kayla?" Gabrielle asked, gathering her presentation materials. "I've been reviewing the detailed program for the Boston Festival," Kayla began carefully. "There's something you should see." She handed Gabrielle a glossy promotional booklet. On the cover, Gabrielle's photo appeared prominently as head judge. But there, listed as the festival's official host and sponsor, was a name that sent an electric shock through her system: Jamal Williams, CEO of Elite Dining Experience. "When did this come in?" Gabrielle asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the sudden dryness in her throat. "Just now. The complete promotional package arrived after you'd gone into the board meeting." Kayla hesitated. "Should I draft a polite decline?" Gabrielle stared at Jamal's professional headshot. Older, distinguished with silver at his temples, wearing the same practiced smile she remembered, the one that never quite reached his eyes. 15 years had passed since he'd dismissed her as insufficient for his world, since he'd rejected their unborn child as a burden. "No," she decided, closing the booklet with deliberate calm. "Confirm my participation." "Are you sure?" Kayla's surprise was evident. "Given the history." "History is precisely why I'll be there," Gabrielle replied. "It's been 15 years. I'm not avoiding professional obligations because of a man who no longer has any relevance to my life." Later that evening, in the private dining room of her flagship Boston restaurant, Gabrielle shared dinner with Marcus Delaney. Their relationship had evolved steadily over the past year, neither rushing toward definitions or commitments, both respectful of the demanding careers that had shaped their lives. "You seem distracted tonight," Marcus observed, his perceptiveness one of the qualities she'd grown to appreciate. At 52, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. His success as CEO of Meridian Hotels secured through decades of strategic innovation rather than ruthless ambition. Gabrielle swirled her wine thoughtfully before meeting his gaze. "The Boston Festival next month. It turns out Jamal Williams is the host and sponsor." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "Miles's father? The one who abandoned us both, yes," Gabrielle completed matter-of-factly. "His company, Elite Dining Experience, apparently sponsors the event. Are you going to withdraw?" "No." The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. "I'm not giving him that power. Besides, it's too important for Miles's career, his first televised performance." Marcus reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "Have you considered telling Miles before the event?" About Jamal being his father? Gabrielle had indeed considered it extensively since discovering Jamal's involvement. I don't know what's right, Marcus. He's 14, old enough to understand, but is this the context in which he should learn about his father? Under the pressure of a national performance? You know him better than anyone, Marcus said gently. What does your instinct tell you? That I should protect him, she admitted, but also that I can't protect him forever. That night, in her spacious penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, Gabrielle found herself unable to sleep. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights reflecting on the dark water below like earthbound stars. The parallel to that night 15 years ago, standing in Jamal's luxury apartment before he shattered her world, wasn't lost on her. She pulled out her phone, opening a secure folder she rarely accessed. There, preserved like artifacts from another lifetime, were the few photos she had of herself and Jamal together. Their wedding day, a charity gala, a vacation in the Bahamas. Evidence of a life she'd once believed was genuine. A black female chef from the south side of Chicago will never be enough for the man I'm becoming, he had said that night, his voice clinical and cold. You and this baby are a burden I'm not willing to carry while I build my empire on Wall Street. Now she commanded an empire worth 3 times what his struggling restaurant chain was valued at, according to recent financial reports. The irony might have been satisfying if it didn't come with the knowledge that Miles had grown up without a father, a void no amount of success could fill. The following week, Gabrielle met with her therapist, Dr. Winters, a relationship she'd maintained through her rising success, recognizing that mental health was as crucial to her well-being as physical health. After 15 years, how do you feel about potentially seeing him again? Dr. Winters asked, after Gabrielle explained the situation. I've imagined this moment, Gabrielle admitted. In my darkest days, when Miles was small and I was working 3 jobs, I fantasized about showing Jamal what he'd thrown away, both in me and in his son. But now, she paused, organizing her thoughts. Now I realize I don't need his validation. I never did. And yet you're choosing to participate in this event despite his involvement, because avoiding it would suggest he still has power over my choices, Gabrielle replied, and because Miles deserves this opportunity, regardless of who his father is or isn't. As the festival approached, Gabrielle threw herself into preparations. She personally tested each dish her team would present at the restaurant opening, selected her wardrobe for the judging panels with meticulous care, and attended Miles's rehearsals whenever possible. One evening, as Miles practiced the Rachmaninoff concerto in their living room, the complexity of the piece highlighting his extraordinary technical skill, Gabrielle found herself studying his profile. The resemblance to Jamal in certain angles was unmistakable, the shape of his brow, the long, elegant fingers flying across the keyboard. What do you think? Miles asked, catching her gaze as he finished a particularly challenging passage. It's beautiful, she answered honestly. You've captured the emotional depth, not just the technical precision. Miles smiled, the expression transforming his features into something wholly his own. The director says this performance could change everything: scholarships, recording opportunities, international recognition. It could indeed, Gabrielle agreed, making a decision in that moment. Miles, there's something we should discuss before the festival. His fingers stilled on the keys. Is it about my father? The question caught her off guard. Why do you ask that? Miles shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture. You get a certain look when you're thinking about him, and this festival feels important, like something might happen. Gabrielle sat beside him on the piano bench, impressed once again by her son's perceptiveness. Yes, it's about your father. He'll be at the festival. His company is the sponsor. Miles absorbed this information with remarkable composure. Will you introduce us? Do you want me to? Gabrielle asked carefully. I don't know, Miles admitted. I've imagined meeting him sometimes. What would I say to someone who didn't want me before I was even born? Gabrielle wrapped her arm around his shoulders, still surprised when she had to reach up instead of down. You don't have to say anything. His choices reflect on him, not on you. Never on you. The week before the festival, Gabrielle's team assembled her wardrobe for the various events. For the opening ceremony and judging panels, she selected a collection of power suits in vibrant colors, her signature style that had become as recognizable as her culinary innovations. For the final gala, where winners would be announced, a custom-designed crimson dress that complemented her warm brown skin perfectly. The red commands attention, her stylist noted approvingly. Perfect for the television cameras. That's secondary, Gabrielle replied. Red is my power color, has been since my first restaurant opening. As final preparations fell into place, Gabrielle conducted one last video meeting with her executive team, confirming arrangements for the simultaneous launch of the Culinary Institute's scholarship program. 300 full scholarships for underprivileged youth, a direct response to the barriers she herself had faced. This will generate excellent publicity alongside the festival coverage, her marketing director observed. This isn't about publicity, Gabrielle corrected firmly. It's about creating opportunities that didn't exist when I was starting out. Every one of those 300 young people has the potential to transform their communities through food, just as I did. The night before their departure for the festival venue, Miles appeared in the doorway of Gabrielle's home office, a question clearly weighing on his mind. Mom, do you think he'll recognize me? Will he know I'm his son? Gabrielle set aside the contract she'd been reviewing. You have his eyes, she said softly, and something in the way you hold yourself. Yes, I think he'll know. Miles nodded, processing this. I'm not nervous about performing for the nation, he said with a small smile, but I'm nervous about this. Whatever happens, Gabrielle assured him, we face it together, just as we always have. As their private car carried them to the festival hotel the following morning, Gabrielle gazed out at the Boston skyline, her mind replaying the journey from abandoned pregnant wife to culinary mogul. Every rejection, every struggle, every triumph had led to this moment, a confrontation 15 years in the making. While arranging the final details for her participation in the prestigious event, Gabrielle didn't know that in 48 hours her name would dominate national headlines, not just for her culinary expertise, but for the public confrontation that would expose the truth about Jamal Williams to millions of viewers. While arranging the final details for her participation in the prestigious event, Gabrielle felt a strange calm settle over her. 15 years of building her empire had prepared her for this moment, facing the man who had once declared her insufficient for his world. Now she would arrive not as a supplicant, but as an equal, perhaps even as his superior. The Symphony Hall of Boston stood majestically illuminated against the evening sky, its classical facade bathed in golden light. Red carpets stretched from the curb to the grand entrance, where photographers and journalists formed a gauntlet of flashing cameras and extended microphones. The Boston Gastronomic and Cultural Festival had become one of the most prestigious events of its kind, combining world-class cuisine with exceptional musical performances in a week-long celebration broadcast nationally. Ready? Gabrielle asked Miles as their limousine joined the queue of arriving dignitaries. At 14, he sat beside her in his first custom-tailored tuxedo, looking both younger and older than his years. A child prodigy on the cusp of manhood. I think so, he replied, adjusting his cufflinks, a gift from Gabrielle for his last birthday. Will he be on the red carpet too? Likely, Gabrielle answered truthfully. As the event's host, he'll probably greet key participants. When their car finally reached the entrance, Gabrielle took a deep breath, centering herself. She wore a striking cobalt blue suit that complemented her complexion perfectly, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that added to her commanding presence. As the door opened, she stepped out with practiced grace, the cameras immediately swiveling in her direction. "Chef Thompson, over here!" The journalists called from every angle as Miles emerged to stand beside her. They moved forward together, Gabrielle's hand resting lightly on her son's shoulder, a protective gesture that also conveyed her pride in him. "Chef Thompson, how does it feel to be the first black woman to head the judging panel for this event?" shouted a reporter from the Culinary Network. Gabrielle smiled with measured warmth. "It's an honor that recognizes not just my work, but the contributions of many diverse voices reshaping American cuisine." "Miles, will you be playing Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto tonight?" another called out. "Tomorrow evening," Miles corrected politely. "Tonight is the opening ceremony and the preliminary rounds of the culinary competition." They continued down the carpet, pausing periodically for photographs. Gabrielle felt rather than saw the subtle shift in the atmosphere, a ripple of anticipation that preceded Jamal's appearance at the entrance to the grand foyer. She steeled herself, maintaining her poised expression as they approached the threshold where her past and present were about to collide. And then, he was there. 15 years older but unmistakably Jamal Williams, distinguished in a midnight blue tuxedo, his once entirely black hair now threaded with silver at the temples. He stood surrounded by event organizers and sycophants, holding court with the practiced charm that had once captivated her. The moment their eyes met across the crowded foyer stretched into an eternity. Gabrielle watched the progression of emotions flash across his face: confusion, recognition, shock. Then his gaze shifted to Miles, standing tall beside her, and she saw the color drain from his face as understanding dawned. It was the resemblance that did it, the unmistakable echo of his own features in the boy's face, the eyes that were carbon copies of his own. Jamal's practiced smile faltered, his hand freezing mid-gesture as he absorbed the reality before him. "Chef Thompson, what an honor to finally meet you in person." An event organizer approached, blissfully unaware of the silent drama unfolding. "Mr. Williams is our host tonight and will be on the same judging panel as you for the final rounds." Taking a deep breath, Gabrielle extended her hand with perfect composure. "Mr. Williams, your reputation precedes you." Jamal hesitated for a fraction of a second before accepting her handshake, his palm clammy against hers. "Gabrielle, what an unexpected surprise." "It's Chef Thompson, please," she corrected smoothly, her smile never wavering. "And this is my son, Miles Thompson, our featured pianist for tomorrow evening's performance." The introduction hung in the air between them, loaded with 15 years of unspoken history. Jamal's eyes remained fixed on Miles, drinking in every detail of the son he had never known. "Impressive to have someone so young as the principal performer," Jamal managed, extending his hand to Miles with visible uncertainty. Miles accepted the handshake with surprising composure, his grip firm and confident. A young man meeting a stranger, not a son encountering his father for the first time. "I've been performing professionally since I was 10, he replied with quiet dignity. "Music is my passion, just as gastronomy is my mother's." The awkward moment was mercifully interrupted by the announcement that the opening ceremony would begin in 5 minutes. Gabrielle and Miles were escorted to their reserved seats in the front row, while Jamal made his way to the stage where he would deliver the welcoming address. Under the glaring stage lights, Jamal appeared momentarily disoriented as he approached the podium. The confidence that had always seemed as much a part of him as his tailored suits was visibly shaken. "Distinguished guests, culinary masters, and music lovers," he began, his voice steadier than his expression. "Welcome to the 10th Annual Boston Gastronomic and Cultural Festival." He continued with rehearsed remarks about the celebration of artistry in all its forms, his eyes repeatedly drifting to where Gabrielle and Miles sat in the front row. "We are particularly fortunate this year," he added, departing from his prepared script, "to have the renowned Chef Thompson with us, who surprisingly began her career as my personal assistant before finding her path." A murmur rippled through the audience. In the front row, Miles turned to Gabrielle with questioning eyes, while she maintained her composed expression, though her hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the program she held. The remainder of the opening ceremony passed in a blur of introductions and explanations of the week's events. When it concluded, attendees moved to an adjacent hall for the welcome reception, where competitors, judges, and performers mingled over champagne and exquisite hors d'oeuvres. "Your personal assistant?" Miles whispered to Gabrielle as they navigated the crowded reception. "You never mentioned that." "Because it wasn't true," Gabrielle replied quietly. "We were married briefly. I'll explain everything later." Before Miles could respond, they were surrounded by admirers and industry colleagues eager to speak with the celebrated chef and her prodigy son. Gabrielle fielded congratulations on her recent James Beard Award and questions about her upcoming cookbook, while Miles discussed his musical training with conductors and fellow musicians. Across the room, Jamal observed them from a distance, his expression unreadable as he mechanically engaged with those around him. The practiced charm that had once been his most effective tool seemed to have abandoned him, leaving behind a shell of confident gestures without their usual substance. The following evening brought Miles's performance, the centerpiece of the festival's cultural program. As Gabrielle took her seat in the concert hall, she noticed Jamal being escorted to a prime location several rows behind her. He looked haggard despite his impeccable attire, as though he hadn't slept. When Miles appeared on stage, approaching the gleaming grand piano with confident grace, a hush fell over the audience. Without sheet music, he seated himself, adjusted the bench, and after a moment of stillness, began the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's notoriously challenging Third Piano Concerto. What followed transcended technical brilliance. Miles played with emotional depth that belied his 14 years, his fingers flying across the keys with precision while conveying the full emotional spectrum of the piece, from melancholy introspection to thunderous passion. The orchestra complemented his performance perfectly, creating a musical conversation that held the audience spellbound. Gabrielle found herself blinking back tears of pride. Through the corner of her eye, she could see Jamal's reflection in a decorative mirror on the wall, his face a mask of stunned recognition as he watched the son he had rejected demonstrate extraordinary talent on a national stage. When the final notes reverberated through the hall, there was a moment of breathless silence before the audience erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet in waves, the standing ovation continuing as Miles took 3 modest bows before leaving the stage. In the green room afterward, Gabrielle embraced her son tightly. "You were magnificent," she whispered against his hair, "beyond words." "Did he watch?" Miles asked quietly, his question revealing that despite his composure, his father's presence weighed heavily on his mind. "Every moment," Gabrielle confirmed. "He couldn't take his eyes off you." The culinary competition began in earnest the following day, with Gabrielle taking her place at the judges' table. Seated 3 chairs away, Jamal appeared to have recovered some of his composure, though his eyes followed her with an intensity that did not escape the television cameras capturing every interaction for the national broadcast. As contestants presented their creations, the tension between the 2 judges became a silent subplot that fascinated viewers. Their professional disagreements, Jamal favoring technically precise but conservative preparations, Gabrielle championing bold flavors and innovative techniques, seemed loaded with subtext that transcended culinary preferences. "Chef Williams prefers the traditional preparation," observed the host during one judging segment, while Chef Thompson advocates for the contestants' modern interpretation. 2 very different approaches to gastronomy. "Innovation requires courage," Gabrielle responded smoothly. "Clinging to tradition alone may feel safe, but it rarely inspires greatness." Jamal's jaw tightened visibly at the thinly veiled critique. "There's value in respecting established methods before attempting to reinvent them," he countered, his eyes locked with hers. "Some people rush toward novelty without mastering fundamentals." The electric tension between them translated into ratings gold. By the 3rd day of competition, social media buzzed with speculation about their obvious history, with hashtags like Chef Showdown and Thompson vs. Williams trending nationally. During a scheduled break in filming, a production assistant approached Gabrielle. "Chef Thompson, the host would like to film a short segment with you and Chef Williams discussing your contrasting culinary philosophies. The audience is fascinated by your dynamic." "I'm sure they are," Gabrielle replied dryly. "Please tell the host I'll participate, but I prefer to keep the focus on the competitor's work, not personal narratives." As she turned to leave, she found Jamal standing nearby, clearly having overheard the exchange. "Gabrielle," he began, his voice low. "Chef Thompson," she corrected firmly. "Chef Thompson," he amended, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "We need to talk. About Miles. About everything." 15 years too late," Gabrielle replied, her voice controlled but resolute. "Please," Jamal insisted, an unfamiliar note of desperation in his tone. "He's my son." "Biology doesn't make you a father," Gabrielle countered, meeting his gaze directly. "Presence does. Sacrifice does. Love does. You forfeited those opportunities by choice." Before he could respond, Miles appeared at her side, his expression guarded as he looked between them. "Mom, they want me to rehearse with the orchestra for tomorrow's closing performance." "Of course, honey," Gabrielle replied, placing a protective hand on his shoulder as she guided him away, leaving Jamal standing alone, the weight of his choices etched visibly on his face. While evaluating the contestants' dishes with unwavering elegance, Gabrielle gathered courage for the moment she had planned for 15 years, the public revelation that would forever change not only her history with Jamal, but millions of viewers' perception of power, rejection, and triumph. While evaluating the contestants' dishes with unwavering elegance, Gabrielle felt the weight of 15 years resting on her shoulders. Each critique she delivered was measured and insightful, her expertise evident to the millions watching at home. Yet beneath her composed exterior, she was gathering strength for what lay ahead, the moment she had mentally rehearsed countless times while rocking a crying infant, working triple shifts, and building her empire brick by painstaking brick. The final evening of the Boston Gastronomic and Cultural Festival arrived with an air of culmination. The Symphony Hall had been transformed for the gala dinner, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables draped in ivory linens. Boston's elite mingled with culinary stars and classical musicians, the room humming with anticipation for the announcement of the competition winners. Gabrielle had chosen her attire with particular care, a structured crimson gown that moved like liquid fire when she walked, accented with subtle gold jewelry. Miles, seated at her table in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looked every inch the young virtuoso who had captivated the nation with his performance the previous evening. "Nervous?" he asked quietly, noticing her fingers tap a subtle rhythm against the tablecloth. "Not nervous," Gabrielle replied, offering him a genuine smile. "Ready?" Across the room, Jamal Williams held court at the host's table, his tuxedo impeccable, his smile practiced as he conversed with city officials and corporate sponsors. Yet Gabrielle noticed how his eyes continually drifted toward their table, the strain evident beneath his polished veneer. The four-course dinner proceeded with ceremonial precision. Between the third and fourth courses, Miles excused himself to prepare for his closing performance, a short piece he had composed specifically for the occasion. As he departed, Jamal's gaze followed him with unconcealed longing. "Ladies and gentlemen," the festival director announced from the stage as dessert plates were cleared, "before we announce this year's culinary champions, please welcome back to the stage the extraordinary young talent who has captivated us all, Miles Thompson." Applause filled the hall as Miles took his position at the grand piano. Without introduction, he began to play, a composition that wove together elements of classical structure with distinctly American jazz influences. The piece spoke of journey, of struggle transformed into triumph, of pain alchemized into beauty. When the final note resonated through the hall, the audience rose in unanimous appreciation. As Miles took his bow, Gabriel caught Jamal hastily wiping moisture from his eyes. "And now," continued the director as Miles returned to his seat, "the moment we've all been waiting for. To announce our champion, please welcome the head of our distinguished judging panel, Chef Gabrielle Thompson." The applause that greeted Gabrielle as she approached the podium confirmed her status in the culinary world. Cameras followed her ascent to the stage, broadcasting her image to millions of viewers nationwide. She stood for a moment, surveying the expectant faces before her, feeling the weight of the microphone in her hand. "Before I announce our winner," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I'd like to share a brief reflection on Journey." The hall quieted, attentive to the unexpected departure from protocol. 15 years ago, Gabrielle continued, her eyes finding Jamal in the crowd, "a man told me that I didn't have what it takes to survive in his world." A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. Near the back, a journalist straightened, sensing a story breaking before her eyes. "This man informed me that a black female chef from the south side of Chicago would never be sufficient for the man he intended to become." Gabrielle's voice remained measured, though the words carried the weight of years of pain transformed into purpose. "He declared that I and the child I was carrying were burdens he wasn't willing to bear while building his empire on Wall Street." The silence in the hall was absolute now. Every eye moved between Gabrielle at the podium and Jamal, who sat frozen in his seat, complexion ashen beneath the warm lighting. "Today my company is valued at more than $800 million, 3 times what his is worth, and the son he rejected as an inconvenience just received a standing ovation on this very stage." Cameras swiveled frantically between Gabrielle, Jamal, and Miles, who sat with perfect posture, his expression composed despite the public revelation of his parentage. "The empire I built starting with nothing but a food truck in Brooklyn now employs over 1,800 people and feeds communities that men like him never considered worthy of their exclusive gastronomy. Each restaurant I open includes a scholarship program for single mothers who dream of culinary careers." Phones appeared throughout the audience as people began recording, sensing they were witnessing a historic moment. Journalists tapped frantically on tablets and phones, filing breaking stories. "I stand before you not seeking revenge," Gabrielle clarified, her voice softening slightly. "This is about truth. It's about showing every young person watching that nobody can define your worth. Nobody can dictate your destiny." She paused, gathering herself before continuing with professional composure. "And now, I'm pleased to announce the winner of this year's Boston Gastronomic Festival culinary competition." The remainder of the ceremony proceeded according to script, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. As Gabrielle presented the award to the winning chef, a young woman from Detroit whose innovative approach to traditional Midwestern cuisine had impressed the judges, the audience's applause seemed directed as much toward Gabrielle herself as toward the champion. When she returned to her seat, Miles squeezed her hand briefly. "You didn't warn me," he whispered. "I'm sorry," Gabrielle replied softly. "I wanted to protect you from the media storm that will follow." "I understand," he said, with maturity beyond his years. He deserved it. As the formal portion of the evening concluded and guests began to mingle, journalists descended from every direction, shouting questions. "Chef Thompson, can you confirm that Jamal Williams is Miles's father? Did Williams provide any financial support over the years? Miles, how does it feel to learn about your father's rejection on national television?" Gabrielle fielded the questions with practiced grace, protecting Miles from the most intrusive inquiries while confirming the essential truth of her revelation. Within minutes, headlines began appearing on news sites and social media. "Celebrity chef exposes billionaire ex-husband who abandoned her pregnant." "Musical prodigy discovers father is restaurant magnate during live event." As they made their way toward the exit, flanked by Gabrielle's security team, Jamal appeared suddenly before them, his composed facade crumbling. "Gabrielle, we need to talk. In private. There's so much to explain." "There's nothing to explain after 15 years, she replied with surprising calmness, Miles standing protectively at her side, still processing the public revelation. "He's my son. I have rights." "You renounced any rights when you tore up those divorce papers and said we were a burden," Gabrielle interrupted, her voice low but firm. "Miles has my surname, and no court will grant you any rights over a teenager you've never known." Jamal's desperation became visible as they continued toward the exit. He reached out, grasping Gabrielle's arm. "Please, I can explain. I was young, ambitious, frightened." Gabriel calmly removed his hand and reached into her clutch, extracting a business card embossed with the logo of her foundation for underprivileged youth. She handed it to him with steady fingers. "The difference between us, Jamal, is that I never needed to diminish anyone to feel powerful, and now the entire country knows that too." The ride back to their hotel was quieter than Gabrielle had anticipated. Miles stared out the window at the Boston streets, his expression thoughtful rather than angry or hurt. "Are you okay?" she finally asked as their car navigated through downtown. "I think so," he replied slowly. "It's strange. I've wondered about him my whole life, but now that I know, I feel nothing. He's just a man who made a bad choice." Gabrielle studied her son's profile, so like Jamal's in structure, yet filled with a compassion and depth that his father had never possessed. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I should have prepared you better." Miles turned to her with unexpected clarity. "You protected me my whole life, Mom. You never let his absence define me. That's what matters." By the time they reached their hotel suite, Gabrielle's phone had exploded with notifications. Her publicist had sent 17 urgent messages, her executive team was requesting an emergency conference call, and offers for exclusive interviews were pouring in from every major network. "It's starting," she murmured, scrolling through the barrage. "This will dominate the news cycle for days." "Do you regret it?" Miles asked, loosening his bow tie as he sank onto the sofa. Gabrielle considered the question seriously. "No," she decided. "The truth has its own timeline. It was time." The following morning brought confirmation of the media explosion. Gabrielle's revelation had become the top trending topic nationwide. Video clips of her speech had been viewed millions of times overnight. Financial News reported that shares in Elite Dining Experience had dropped 12% in after-hours trading. As Gabrielle prepared for their departure, arranging for additional security to navigate the journalists camped outside the hotel, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Thompson, this is Sharon Lane from the New York Times. I'm working on a feature about successful women entrepreneurs who overcame significant obstacles. In light of recent revelations, we'd like to expand our profile of you to include your personal journey." Similar calls followed. Book publishers offering seven-figure advances for her memoir, television producers pitching documentary series about her rise from abandoned mother to culinary mogul, women's organizations requesting she speak at empowerment conferences. In the days that followed, the storm intensified. Jamal's company stock continued its free fall as celebrities and politicians canceled their Elite Dining Experience memberships. Former employees emerged with stories of toxic workplace practices and discriminatory policies. Entertainment News reported that Jamal's wife, socialite Veronica Astor Williams, had been seen consulting with Manhattan's most prominent divorce attorney. Meanwhile, reservations for Soulful Creations restaurants nationwide doubled overnight. Applications to Gabrielle's Culinary Institute tripled. The world had witnessed her story of abandonment and triumph and responded with overwhelming support. 1 week after the Boston revelation, as Gabrielle reviewed the media coverage in her office, her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Miles's music director from Juilliard is here. She says it's urgent." Dr. Rivera entered, her expression unusually animated. "I apologize for coming without an appointment, but this couldn't wait. Since Miles's performance in Boston, We've received unprecedented interest from international conservatories. The Vienna Philharmonic wants him as a featured soloist for their spring season. Deutsche Grammophon is proposing a recording contract for young artists. Gabrielle listened, pride mixing with protective concern. That's extraordinary, but Miles is only 14. Which is why I came to you first, Dr. Rivera acknowledged. These opportunities are exceptional, but they must be balanced with his well-being and continued development. As Gabrielle contemplated this new chapter in their journey, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw the news? You were magnificent. Dinner tonight to celebrate your liberation? She smiled, typing back an acceptance. For the first time in 15 years, she felt truly free, not just financially independent, not just professionally successful, but emotionally unburdened. The secret she had carried since that cold December night when Jamal had dismissed her worth had been transformed from a private wound into a public testimony of resilience. In the days that followed, the tempest of media attention was implacable. Ações da Elite Dining Experience despencaram 32% em 3 dias. Celebridades e políticos cancelaram reservas. Ex-funcionários surgiram com histórias de assédio e discriminação. A segunda esposa de Jamal, uma socialite de Nova York, anunciou publicamente a separação. In the days that followed, the media storm reached unprecedented proportions. Elite Dining Experience stock plummeted 32% in just 3 days, wiping out nearly $200 million in market value. Celebrities and politicians who had once clamored for memberships at Jamal's exclusive establishments now publicly canceled their reservations, issuing statements about supporting businesses with ethical leadership and family values. The morning after her return to Boston headquarters, Gabrielle sat in her office reviewing the latest developments with her crisis management team. The revelation had transformed from a personal moment of truth into a cultural phenomenon that demanded careful navigation. Former employees of Elite Dining are coming forward hourly, her media director explained, sliding a tablet across the desk. Allegations of racial discrimination in hiring practices, sexual harassment claims that were buried, wage theft from immigrant staff. It's a corporate nightmare. Gabrielle scanned the headlines without satisfaction. There was no joy in watching Jamal's empire crumble, only a sense of justice long delayed. Our position remains the same, she instructed. No additional comments about Mr. Williams or his business practices. My statement in Boston stands on its own. There's one more development, her assistant added hesitantly. Veronica Astor Williams has been photographed entering Patricia Levinson's office. The implication was clear. Patricia Levinson was Manhattan's most sought-after divorce attorney, known for securing record-breaking settlements for high-profile clients. Gabrielle nodded, dismissing the team. Alone in her office, she turned to the wall of windows overlooking the city she now called home. The irony wasn't lost on her. 15 years ago, Jamal had discarded her and their unborn child as impediments to his ambition. Now his second marriage appeared to be dissolving under the weight of his exposed character, while Gabrielle's revelation had only strengthened her position in the business world. Her phone chimed with a text from Miles. Finished practice. Dr. Rivera wants to discuss Vienna Philharmonic opportunity. Dinner tonight? Typing a quick confirmation, Gabrielle smiled at the resilience of her son. Despite the public revelation of his paternity, Miles remained focused on his music, his future, a testament to the stability she'd fought to provide him. That evening, over dinner at their favorite restaurant, Miles surprised her with his perspective on the ongoing media frenzy. I received an email today, he said, carefully cutting his steak. From him. Gabrielle set down her fork. What did it say? That he regrets every day of the 15 years he missed, that he hopes someday I might consider meeting him. Miles looked up, his expression thoughtful. I think I want to. Not for him, but for me. To understand. Studying her son's face, so like Jamal's in structure, yet filled with a compassion his father had never demonstrated, Gabrielle felt a complex mixture of protectiveness and respect for his autonomy. "If that's what you want," she said carefully, "I won't stand in your way. But you should be prepared for disappointment. The man I knew was skilled at presenting himself as whatever he believed others wanted him to be." Miles nodded solemnly. "I know. I don't expect a father, just answers." The meeting between father and son was arranged for 2 weeks later at a quiet cafe in Boston. Gabrielle didn't attend, respecting Miles's desire to form his own impressions. She spent those hours in her office, unable to focus on work, checking her phone repeatedly until Miles's text finally arrived. "On my way home." When Miles entered their apartment that evening, his expression was contemplative rather than upset. Gabrielle waited, giving him space to process the encounter in his own way. "He cried a lot," Miles finally said, sitting at the piano but not playing, just resting his fingers on the silent keys. "Showed me photos from when he was young, talked about his parents, my grandparents I never knew, said he was too ambitious, too cowardly to be a father." "And how did that make you feel?" Gabrielle asked gently. "Like I was meeting an interesting stranger, not a father," Miles replied with surprising insight. "He offered me money, a lot of money, talked about inheritance, trust funds, opportunities." The revelation didn't surprise Gabrielle. Jamal had always believed money could solve any problem, replace any emotional connection. "What did you say?" Miles smiled slightly. "I told him we didn't need his money, that you taught me value isn't measured by zeros in a bank account." His fingers pressed down, releasing a soft, thoughtful chord from the piano. "But I said we could have coffee occasionally. Maybe." Gabrielle crossed the room, wrapping her arms around her son's shoulders. "I'm proud of you, for your compassion, your wisdom, everything you are." 3 months later, Boston buzzed with anticipation for the grand opening of the soulful culinary Thompson Institute for Young Talent. The project represented the culmination of Gabrielle's vision, a state-of-the-art facility offering 300 full scholarships to promising culinary students from underserved communities. The morning of the gala, Gabrielle walked through the gleaming kitchens, demonstration theaters, and classrooms, each space designed to nurture the next generation of culinary innovators. Every detail reflected her journey, from the Soul Food Heritage Wall celebrating Black culinary traditions to the innovation labs equipped with cutting-edge technology. "Everything is ready for tonight," her project director confirmed. "All 300 scholarship recipients will be present, along with the press, donors, and city officials." The gala itself was a triumph of organization and meaning. Students in crisp white uniforms served dishes they had prepared under the guidance of Gabrielle's executive chefs. Miles performed a specially composed piece celebrating his mother's journey from food truck entrepreneur to culinary icon. Donors mingled with scholarship recipients, creating connections that would shape the future of American cuisine. As Gabrielle prepared to deliver her keynote address, a commotion at the entrance caught her attention. Security personnel were speaking in hushed tones, clearly dealing with an unexpected situation. Moments later, her assistant approached the podium. "Jamal Williams is here," she whispered. "He wasn't invited. Security wants to know if they should remove him." Gabrielle glanced toward the entrance where Jamal stood awkwardly in an ill-fitting suit that hung on his now thinner frame. Gone was the commanding presence that had once dominated rooms. This man appeared diminished, uncertain. "Let him stay," Gabrielle decided, "but keep security nearby." Her speech celebrated the Institute's mission without reference to her personal journey. The focus remained firmly on the students, their potential, their dreams, the barriers they had already overcome. When she concluded to enthusiastic applause, Gabrielle felt a sense of completion. This institute represented not just her success, but her purpose, creating opportunities she had been denied. As the evening wound down, Gabrielle circulated among guests, accepting congratulations and discussing future plans. She was deep in conversation with the mayor when she felt a presence behind her. "Gabrielle," Jamal's voice was subdued, lacking its former confidence. "Congratulations on the institute, it's impressive." Turning, she took in his appearance with clinical detachment. 3 months had aged him visibly, lines etched deeper around his eyes, silver now dominant in his once black hair. His designer watch was gone, replaced by a simpler timepiece. "Thank you," she replied evenly, "though I don't recall sending you an invitation." "You didn't." He glanced around at the bustling celebration. "I hope it's okay that I came. I wanted to understand what you've built." 300 full scholarships for young people from communities like the one I grew up in, Gabrielle explained, professional rather than personal. Opportunities I never had. Jamal nodded, his gaze drifting to Miles, who was charming a group of donors near the piano. "I know it's too late for us, Gabrielle. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to be part of Miles's life somehow, and I want to contribute to your work." Gabrielle studied the man before her, not the ambitious Wall Street prodigy who had discarded her, but someone clearly broken by the consequences of his own choices. "Miles is the one who decides who belongs in his life," she replied finally. "As for the institute, we accept anonymous donations. I'm not interested in having your name associated with my work to clean your conscience or public image." Jamal's shoulders slumped slightly. "My company is practically bankrupt," he confessed, the admission clearly painful. "I've lost almost everything since Boston." Gabrielle felt neither satisfaction nor pity at this revelation. "Then build something new, something with purpose beyond profit and status. It's not too late to start over. I'm proof of that." As Jamal moved away, Marcus Delaney approached with 2 champagne flutes. Their relationship had deepened in the months since Boston, evolving into something built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "That looked intense," he observed, handing her a glass. "Are you all right?" Gabrielle surveyed the room, young chefs in training, many of them children of single mothers like she had once been. Miles at the piano, enchanting the guests. Her executive team, predominantly composed of black women, managing the event with flawless precision. "I'm better than all right," she answered, raising her glass. "I'm finally free." Across the room, Jamal Williams observed the scene. The empire Gabrielle had built, the son he had rejected, the full life she had created without him. For the first time, he fully comprehended the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a family, but the chance to be part of something truly meaningful. As Gabrielle Thompson toasted to the future, surrounded by her empire and her legacy, Jamal Williams slipped quietly through the back door, carrying the weight of his past choices and the certainty that some opportunities once lost never return. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.